Welcome to Leliria Speaks, and tonight we're going to be reading about Pinkie, and the story is called Pinkie Watches Paint Dry. This should be very interesting, at least I think it should. The room had been orange, and now it was not. Pinkie Pie couldn't wrap her head around it. How very easy it was to change the identity of a thing simply by changing its color. Whether it was willing to be changed or not, what had once been an orange room was now soon to be the pink room, and it was simply a matter of waiting for the paint to dry. And once it did, there would be no going back. Together they reached the point of no return, and once they crossed that threshold, nothing would ever be the same. There was nothing the walls could do about it either. They had no say in the matter, and she had been the one to do it to them, and she had been the one to steal the room's very identity. After all, once upon a time, her loft, the sugar cube corner, had been painted orange. It had been the orange room. Now it was not. Soon it was going to be pink. Then it would be the pink room, and all the memories of the orange room would fade into obscurity with time. What had once been defined by its uniqueness was being assimilated, falling into place along with everything else. After all, everything she owned was pink, and soon her bedroom would be no different. What did that say about the fleetingness of an individual when something as simple as a can of paint could change the very nature of a thing? When a mere color could change what a thing was at its very core. For a room that was no longer orange could no longer be called the orange room. The room would become something else entirely. Even if she painted over it once, the pink had dried. In order to try to recapture the orange, she was quickly finding herself missing. It would never again be simply the orange room. Instead, it would forever be known as the room that had once been the orange and then was pink and now was orange again. What a mouthful. And Pinkie Pie didn't know if she had been able to remember the name that long. I wouldn't remember it. Even the acronym, we're not going to even try to say that. We're just going to let that word be there. TRTHOBO, boat, WPANWOA. I'm not going to try to go for that one. Was too long for her liking, and she doubted whether even if her mind would be sharp enough to keep track of that many letters. Pinkie thinks too much. She stood in the middle of the room, her coat and mane covered in flecks of stuff. Lying off to the side, abandoned and forgotten, there lay two now empty cans of paint and a pair of brushes still coated with fresh paint. Her furniture had been covered in protective tarps before they began their task, but there had been nothing in place to protect those poor walls, perhaps. Pinkie mused because painting the walls had been entirely point of exercise in the first place, rendering such tarps unnecessarily and unhelpful. Pinkie took a step forward, hoof outstretched, and placed it gently against the closet wall. The paint was still damp, having not yet dried enough for it to be permanent. That meant that the orange room was still in limbo. No longer orange, true, but not entirely pink either. That could still be changed, and that meant that the choice was hers. Did she let fate run its course? Was it more merciful to end this transformation now, removing the paint while it was still wet and hopefully easier to do so? Or would it be kinder to see the process through uninterrupted and allow her precious bedroom to become what it would inevitably become, pink like everything else she possessed? Was it too late? Had the damage already been done? Yes. Was such a change irrevocable, seeping into the very nature of the walls themselves? Perhaps the walls no longer viewed themselves as orange walls. Perhaps they had grudgingly accepted their destiny as pink walls and wouldn't resent her for altering them any further if she chose to do so. I think she should just leave them alone. Pinkie Pie wanted to make amends, but she didn't know how. She didn't know how to make it up to the poor walls. After all, she had already changed them too much, had already stripped them of their identities. And if she went any further, what would become of them? If paint had such power, then what could it do to her? I think she overthinks a little too much. Wide-eyed Pinkie Pie examined her hoof. Bright pink, just like the rest of her, but now it's streaked with the pink paint as well. If paint could change the very essence of a thing, what would it have done to her if the paint had been green or blue or burnt sienna instead of pink? She'd be one of those colors, of course. It had been a fortunate coincidence that she happened to be on her own favorite color, one that she would forever be grateful for. But if that hadn't been the case, she could even begin to imagine what it would have meant. The paint she'd chosen had been any other color, then accidentally covering it would have changed her, just as the four walls surrounding her had been changed. She wouldn't have been a Pinkie Pie covered in pink paint polka dotties, blah. The way she was now, she would have been a blue polka dot, almost pinky but not quite. She wouldn't have been a proper Pinkie at all. And if she had been stained in blue, if she wasn't necessarily a Pinkie, if that wasn't a static thing, and if it wasn't so easy to change or disguise, then who was she? I think she's still just Pinkie Pie. My opinion, of course. If she wasn't a full-blooded Pinkie Pie, then she didn't know who she was at all. She certainly couldn't be a blue or a greeny or a burnt sienna. She had been a Pinkie all her life, after all, and she was exceptionally good at it. Being a Pinkie Pie was all she ever known, all she could trust herself with, all she wanted. She couldn't bear the thought of some kind of force change claiming her identity. But wasn't that what she herself had done to the Orange Room? She had taken upon herself to change it, potentially against its will, for the better. She had believed at the time. She was now quickly coming to regret it. But perhaps all she'd done was steal its identity and now force a new one upon it, one that it had no option about. The orange room was no longer orange room. Pinkie Pie might no longer be Pinkie. All it took to change a thing in such a way was simply a can of paint. Almost hesitantly, Pinkie Pie once again touched the drying pink paint, only to find that it was no longer wet to the touch. Oh well, it was too late then. The deed had been done. The orange room was forever gone, and in its place was nothing but pink. See, I told you she was being weird. How long has she been standing there? Rainbow Dash and Twilight Sparkle stood in the entrance of Pinkie Pie's bedroom, watching her in wide-eyed fascination. Well, Twilight was at least. Rainbow was scowling. I'd probably be scowling too, from her odd behavior. I don't know. Almost an hour, I guess. She wanted to paint her room, so I helped her. And we started painting, and then suddenly she started just staring at the wall, looking scared and saying stuff like, "What have I done? What have I done? I'm so sorry." Acting all crazy. And then she started doing this. Are you sure she's just being Pinkie Pie? Twilight ventured. From her perspective, all she could see was a pink pony standing perfectly still in the middle of her room. A glazed look in her eyes, as though she was deeply lost in thought. That would have been alarming enough under ordinary circumstances, but with Pinkie, it was especially so. Pinkie Pie wasn't exactly the kind of pony prone to bouts of philosophical thought. I guess they're saying she's not smart. The unicorn had to acknowledge that seeing her in the midst of such contemplation was a tad worrisome. Pinkie Pie doesn't act crazy like this. Pinkie Pie acts crazy by jumping around and talking about random stuff. Since when does she get all moody? There was a brief silence while the two of them watched their friend continue to stand perfectly still. She might not even have been breathing. They had no way to tell. There was nothing in her stance to give it away, and from her position, they couldn't see whether her chest was rising or falling or not. She was like a statue. Just you wait. Her hair's gonna go flat, and she'll start talking about rocks any second now, Rainbow Dash muttered rather darkly after a moment of this. Why is she apologizing? I have no idea. Once she started crying after eating a cupcake because she missed it. Maybe she feels bad about painting the walls. That's silly. So what do we do? Dash asked, again peering through the door at the stoically tragic figure of the mournful Pinkie Pie, alone except for the alligator absently gumming on her tail with vacant eyes. The alligator, though normally borderline catatonic, gifted with dubious levels of sentience, was currently more active and lively than his normal energetic mistress. I'm not sure, Twilight confessed, scratching her head and frowning. She liked to believe that she was rather intelligent, but even she had to confess that Pinkie was an enigma. No pony ever knew why she did a thing, let alone how to make her stop. And if Pinkie Pie had decided to stop being a whirlwind of pure energy instead of fall into some strange state of melancholy, who is she to judge? It looks like she's having some kind of over-introspective internal monologue, but I can't really tell. What? What kind of egghead are you? Are you supposed to be good at fixing this kind of thing? Twilight shrugged helplessly, and Rainbow Dash rolled her eyes before stumping away. She could have easily flown down the stairs, but she seemed determined to make as much noise as possible in order to emphasize just how fed up she was, and so stormed down the steps, shaking the entire house. For a minute or two, Twilight remained at the door, watching her friend somewhat curiously. She was yet to solve the puzzle of Pinkie's existence, and this was just another mystery regarding her strange friend. But like all intellectuals, she knew how to pick her battles. Pinkie Pie was just a case that may never solve, and there would be no point in straining herself to try. So instead, she would observe and see what she could learn about Pinkie Pie's currently curious state for future reference. She was entirely clear on why Rainbow Dash had come to her for help, but the egghead comment made her suspect that the Pegasus had thought she know a spell to snap Pinkie out of this unprecedented lucidity or something. But the stupor of the pink pony was almost hypnotic, seeing that the normally spastic Baker, so subdued for once, had a strangely relaxing effect, and Twilight almost didn't want it to end. Truth to be told, it was quite peaceful. Sounds like she's going loony with her. Okay. She was a murderer. Wow, what a title. At least if the orange room had been actually a pony instead of a studio apartment, his blood would have been on her hooves as a result of what she had done to him. Only in this case, it wasn't blood, it was paint. Actually, maybe that didn't work. If she had been stripped of her old orange paint, rather than just paint over it, then the old paint might have been the blood of the room, and then the metaphor would have worked. That's gross. Since the paint on her hooves was the new paint, and it was more like she given the orange room new blood rather than shedding his old blood. So instead of having murdered him, it was like Pinkie had given him too much life, and it had overwhelmed him with this unbearable liveliness. Yes, that was it. Okay, strange and stranger. Rainbow Dash barreled past Twilight into the freshly painted room, knocking aside Gummy the alligator so she could shove a cupcake into Pinkie's face. "Cupcake," she said fiercely, and looked up at the cupcake. "Eat the cupcake." For a moment, Pinkie looked startled just to see Rainbow Dash there in front of her, a dazed look crossing her face. Then her eyes fell on the cupcake and they grew wide. With a squeal of joy, she yanked it from the Pegasus and shoved it into her mouth. In the pleasure and licking her lips. "Wow. Thanks, Dashy," she cried. "That was yummy. I haven't had a cupcake in like forever. I totally needed one." Rainbow Dash grinned triumphantly. "Mr. and Mrs. Cake said that you get like this sometimes when you don't have enough sugar. Then you start slowing down and watching grass grow and stuff. And all it takes to snap you out of it is a cupcake," she explained with satisfaction. "So you're good now? Back to normal?" "Yeah, huh?" "Thanks again for the cupcake," Pinkie cried, through a mouthful of pastry, beaming. "Red velvet is my favorite flavor right now. Oh my gosh, this is so good. You should eat one too. We should have a cupcake party." "Yep, back to normal," Rainbow Dash declared, clapping Pinkie on the shoulder with a wing and steering her towards the door. "Come on, I think the paint fumes are getting to me too. Let's go make Tank and Gummy wrestle or something." "Yeah." And so the two friends chatty comfortably as they waltzed past Twilight, as though they forgotten that the unicorn was even there. With a sigh, Twilight turned and followed them out. Okay. Maybe Pinkie thought munching on an unexpected cupcake, maybe that's what life was all about. In the end, accepting loss and change and finding a way to work around it and move on. Maybe life was about not letting tragedies bog you down and cause you to forget the little things that make life truly shine. Maybe life was about those small pleasures, those tiny instances of joy. Not so much about the bad things. Maybe it was the secret to true happiness. So Pinkie exited the formerly orange room with no lingering regrets, not looking back to see what she left behind even once, instead choosing to look only forwards, to a bright future ahead, to friends, to delicious, tasty cupcakes with sprinkles. Sounds good to me. Seeing the expression of beatific enlightenment on Pinkie Pie's face, Rainbow Dash rolled her eyes and sighed. "You're so weird," she muttered. I think I'm gonna go have a cupcake. And I did enjoy this story, even though it's a little bit strange. I don't think she killed the room or murdered it or anything, but if that's the way she thought, then who are we to change her mind? I'm just glad they stuffed that cupcake in her mouth and changed her mind. Okay, guys, good night all. This has been Leliria Speaks, and we're signing off now. Bye-bye.